Ready or Not is a game that inherently relies on weapons. The city of Los Sueños is saturated with murder cults, terrorist organizations, and worst of all, furries. It's an incredibly dangerous place. So I had a thought. What would happen if one day we woke up and all the guns at the LSPD mysteriously vanished? No rifles, no pistols, not even a rogue beanbag or pepperball gun. Would we still be able to perform our job, or would we get folded almost immediately? Today, I intend to find out. Now, before we get this video started, yes, everybody knows that you can beat this game non-lethally. But usually these runs involve spamming things like the beanbag shotgun or the pepperball rifles. But not today. For this run, I will be using no guns whatsoever. No pepperball rifles, no beanbag shotguns, not even a taser. And for extra spice, I'm also banning anything with the word gun in the name. So no mirror gun, no breaching shotgun. All of these things are completely off limits to me. This leaves me with exactly 3 tools to take out enemies: pepper spray, non-lethal grenades, and C2 breaching charges. And because it wouldn't really be fair if I made a SWAT team do the work while I hid in the corner, I also decided to leave my teammates behind for this run. So it'll just be me and my questionable tactics versus a city full of armed maniacs. Let's get into it. Now, something that I would quickly realize during this run was that I was made of glass. Since I wasn't carrying any guns, I needed every equipment slot possible. And because I was playing vanilla and not gunfighter, that meant equipping the lightest and shittiest armor possible just so I had enough grenades to beat a level. Dude, it was so fucking ass. Now, under the right circumstances, this build would be insanely effective. But more often than not, it just meant that I'd die super quickly, which sucked. For right now though, there wasn't anything that I really had to worry about. I was able to breeze through both of the first 2 levels thanks to using the CS gas. The streamer mission was especially easy thanks to those tight claustrophobic rooms. I could pretty much just stay outside and throw a couple gas grenades and they would cover the entire apartment. It was super easy. But the third mission is when I began to run into a little bit of a problem. Now, while Twisted Nerve does have its fair share of tight interiors, it also has several wide open spaces, which would become the bane of my existence. You gotta be fucking kidding me, dude. You see, what would happen is I would throw my tear gas as usual, and instead of sticking around like good little criminals, the suspects would just walk away from the gas and shoot at me from a distance, which was not ideal. The solution for this problem though? The riot shield. Now dude, don't get me wrong, I hate the riot shield. I've always hated the riot shield. I think it's super clunky, it's not fun to use. If there was one thing in the game that I could just fucking get rid of, it would be that. But desperate times call for desperate measures, and I didn't really have a choice at this point. You'll notice in my footage that whenever I use it, it's not really pretty, but it did keep me alive just long enough to get to cover and throw a grenade. And as much as I hate it, the riot shield was sort of the only reason that I got past Twisted Nerve. I fucking hate saying that out loud. After Twisted Nerve though, the next few levels were actually a breath of fresh air. Even levels like the Spider, which do have these open areas, were made manageable because of their low enemy count. I could essentially just cross map from the other side of the fence and fumigate the entire property. It was that easy. Nobody stood a chance. The only hiccup that I really experienced was with Lethal Obsession, because some of the suspects there wear gas masks. So instead of tear gas, I just swapped to stinger grenades. Problem solved. Ides of March was sort of the same deal, right? I showed up with a small army's worth of tear gas and just hotboxed the entire apartment building. It was pretty easy. It was also around this point that I started getting really liberal with my C2 charges, mainly because I was getting sick of the trapped and locked doors. So look, if a suspect accidentally gets blown up, that's on them. That I have nothing to do with that. I began to feel a bit more resistance though on the next level, the Mindjot Data Center. Now, as most of you guys probably know, the Mindjot Center has a ton of these different outside areas, many of which are filled with several enemies. Also, it doesn't help that a lot of the hallways and rooms inside of the building are confusing enough to where you can accidentally waste a grenade on a spot that you've already cleared. Some of the enemies here also wore gas masks, which meant that I had to swap between stinger and flashbangs, and the sheer number of enemies here made conserving my grenades a nightmare. Plus, dude, it seemed like every time I tried to arrest a suspect, another enemy would just pop out and shoot me. And when I would go to engage that enemy instead, that original suspect that I was arresting would just get back up and finish off the job. To a certain extent, I was beginning to feel like I was outnumbered. Eventually though, I was able to find a tactic that could help me sort of even the scales a bit. Many of the enemies in the game will see a gas cloud and refuse to chase you through it. So by throwing down one of these grenades preemptively, I was able to buy myself a bit more time to cuff a suspect. I didn't have to fight two people at once. Moving onward though, I eventually made my way towards the Tran residence, which was probably the easiest mission that I had played in this challenge thus far. And dude, listen, after Mine Shot, I was so excited for it. I gassed the boys, I gassed the sick fucking grandma, everybody got some tear gas. But it was after this point that everything would begin to go downhill. Karma would bite me in the ass a bit. The wheels on my magic school bus would roll off and go down the fucking freeway. And it all began at the post office. Now dude, listen, in my eyes, post office is the follow the train mission of Ready or Not. It's this really difficult map that comes out of fucking nowhere and just ruins your day. And this challenge would be no exception. Now, I'd love to sit here and say that there was a particular spot that messed me up, but there wasn't. The entire map just kicked my ass from beginning to end. I'm not proud to admit this, but it took me 17 tries to get past this map. The open spaces, the amount of enemies, and the amount of just stupid mistakes on my part made the level feel like it was insurmountable. And unfortunately for me, that trend would only continue, because immediately after the post office map was Valley of the Dolls. Not ideal. Now, Valley of the Dolls is actually where I had to alter the challenge a little bit, because no matter how hard I tried, no matter how smart I attempted to be, I would wind up reaching the end of the level with several enemies remaining and no more grenades, which made it impossible for me to continue. It's because of this that I wound up activating the Gunfighter mod for extra equipment slots. Now, some of you guys might think that's unfair, and that's because it is. Consider the rules changed. But don't let this upset you though, because even with this added advantage, Valley of the Dolls was still ludicrously difficult. You see, the areas with the most enemy spawns here are these two wide open areas, and I found myself sort of running into the same problem that I had with Twisted Nerve. Luckily for me though, on one of my playthroughs, I sort of just lucked out and most of the enemies spawned inside, which made them a lot easier to get rid of. And while for now, luck felt like it was on my side, that feeling would quickly fade. After completing Valley of the Dolls, there was the Community College map, which I figured would be pretty easy. I mean, after all, there are only 4 enemies and everything is fairly confined to the indoors. But even with all of these advantages, I started to make stupid mistakes. I wasn't checking my corners like I should. I was standing in the middle of door frames. On one go through, I even put down some C2 charges, not knowing that there were students on the other side of the door. So yeah, Rust Belt and Sins of the Father were more of the same. Both were maps that should have favored my style of play up to that point. Interior heavy places that felt very claustrophobic. But for whatever reason, I just couldn't seem to lock in and get them done in the way they needed to be. I was beginning to play nervous. And although I managed to beat both of these missions, I felt my energy in the challenge slipping a bit. So I decided to call it a night and pick the challenge back up the next morning. The next day, I would start back up where I had left off, with Neon Tomb, and somehow, through the grace of God, I guess, I was able to beat this mission on my second try. Now, to me, this just seemed to verify what I had already known. The map is full of tight hallways and rooms, and compared to my attempts on the other levels, I was able to get through it pretty easily. There was a little detail that did give me some cause for concern though. Even after berating some enemies with multiple grenades and less lethals, they still wouldn't surrender. For this challenge to work, I needed all of the enemies to go down in 1 or 2 shots max, because otherwise I would just run out of grenades and not be able to complete the mission. And while right now I could just sort of chalk it up to the AI acting weird, my next mission wouldn't be nearly as easy, as the car dealership was not only mainly outdoors, it also had all of these cars serving as cover. The enemies could pop out and shoot at me really easily, but if I didn't have have my grenade placement in the exact right position, then the enemy wouldn't be affected at all. It was at this point in the challenge that things really began to feel unfair. I tried clearing the map inside out, I tried going outside in, I even tried the different spawn locations, but no matter where I started or which direction I took, I always seemed to get killed once I reached that main car lot. That was until I remembered about the grenade launchers. Now, up until this point, I had been using the grenade launchers pretty sparingly. Mainly, they were just an excuse for me to get some extra grenades. But this is when I found out that you could almost use them like you would a gun. You see, instead of the delayed reaction that you get with regular grenades, the grenade launchers create an explosion instantly. As soon as the grenade reaches its target, it will explode. Meaning that if you really wanted to, you could load one of these with stinger grenades and essentially use it like a non-lethal gun, which is exactly what I would do. Instantly, it made the car lot portion of this map so much more bearable, and with it, I was finally able to complete the dealership mission. However, it is worth noting that while this method was effective, the launcher would only provide me with 4 shots, meaning that if I was going to use it, I was going to have to make every shot count. Now, if you've been keeping track throughout this video, I only had 3 levels left in the base game to complete, but none of these were anything to scoff at. In fact, the first of the 3 may have even been the hardest. Carriers of the Vine finds us responding to a cult held up at a rural winery. Once again, wide open spaces and scattered enemies. Just about the worst case scenario that you could imagine. I was also at a point where I was starting to worry about running out of grenades again, because even with 25 equipment slots, there were so many enemies and areas on the level that it nearly became impossible. Eventually though, after enough luck and brute fucking force, I got some favorable spawns and was able to conserve my equipment and reach the end of the level. Now the next map wasn't as big a kick in the balls as the last one, but it still wasn't the most ideal situation. While it was still a massive fucking map, it was at least confined to the indoors, so we had that to look forward to. This time I also tried to use some of the pepper spray that I had, but I quickly found out that against motivated terrorists, mace doesn't really do anything. These guys would just fire through the pepper spray blindly and kill me anyways. So I decided to remove that from my loadout and just throw in another grenade. And little did I know how much this grenade would come in handy, because when I finally finished the level, I literally had nothing left. No equipment whatsoever. I had spent everything, which was really convenient, but it also worried me a lot about the last mission. Now, for the uninitiated, hide and seek is the final and, in this case, most difficult level in Ready or Not. Not only is there a massive outdoor area that we need to clear, but there are also several outbuildings, storage containers, and other places that we'll need to work our way through. On this map, it's dark and rainy, so the visibility isn't great, and people can snipe you from all the way across the map. I did not have a good time with it. Also, from what I've seen, the enemy count on this map seems like it's in the mid to high 20s, meaning that even if I do conserve all of my grenades and equipment perfectly, I still might not have enough gear to get through. To put it plainly, I was gonna have to get lucky. So needless to say, I spent a long fucking time on this map. There were a lot of occasions where I would get stupidly close to finishing this map, only to bend a corner or hit the wrong key on my keyboard and find myself just getting absolutely laser beamed by somebody. On one occasion, I was literally in the auction room. I had cleared everything, and the creepy fucking gimp suit dude headshot me before I could even realize what had happened. It was mind-numbing. However, if there's one thing that I've learned over the years about tactical shooter games, it's that sometimes you can be a little bitch and still get rewarded for it. And that's what I did. I ratted my way from container to container, peeking while I already had a pulled grenade sitting in my hand. I was essentially doing the grenade equivalent of pre-firing every corner that I came across. And while on some maps this would sort of be pointless because, you know, you just bump into an empty wall and waste a grenade, there were so many enemies here that you'd bump into one more often than not. And after a couple of runs of using this strategy, I finally made my way through Warehouse 13 into the auction house and beat Ready or Not without using a gun. It may not have been pretty, it may not have been flashy, but I don't think that's what any of you wanted to see. If any of you sickos enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe. But with that being said, thank you guys so much for sharing your day with me. You know I love you. I'm out.